so on. So I think that when one looks underneath as to what the real agenda here is, you will end up, the future, in my view, is going to be completely different. In fact, I think will be opposite to the vision that they had in 1949. Now they say, well, it's cost. How am I doing? Somebody's going to bang a shoe. Cost, they say. Well, I want to deal with that in a general term. I'm not suggesting for one moment, and I want to make it clear, I'm not suggesting that legal aid lawyers, whether they're in the civil division or the criminal division, and most of us who've worked in both divisions over many years recognise, of course you've got to be efficient. Nobody wants really, I don't think any legal aid lawyer I've ever met wants to be inefficient. Most legal aid lawyers that I know, including myself, feel we have to be publicly accountable for what we do, how we do it, and what is paid for the services that we provide. It's public money. No objection to any of that. We should be accountable, we should be efficient, and we should be ensuring that public money is spent in the best possible way. There's no problem about that. But the real problem is that at the moment, there are gaps even in the present system, and I'll touch upon them in the last few seconds that I've got. But just before we're dealing with the question of cost, well, let's just think about this. It's already been referred to. It's a 27% increase that's happened over from 97 through to 2006. So we're now at the 2 billion mark. Well, let's just reflect on what this government is prepared to spend on other things. And it bears thinking about. I'm not making a polemical political point. I'm saying we have to decide as a community what we want to spend our money on. And I'm making it perfectly clear, I'm not prepared to spend, if I had my own way about it, virtually, this is the budget, the military budget for you-know-what, over the next year. It's split into different components. But funnily enough, it comes out to just under £2 billion for 1 year. Same as the legal aid budget currently is. That's not counting the amount of money that has already been spent in that particular field since the beginning of the war in 2003. And then we have another proposal which apparently is being agreed very soon. We're going to have a revamped Trident, aren't we? How much is that going to cost? Apparently, and of course they never keep within budget, any more than the Olympics, or Dome, or anything else. 30 billion. So don't tell me there's no money in the kitty. There's plenty of money when they want to spend it on things that they think are political priorities. They're entitled to political priorities. So am I. I don't agree with the ones they've got. I don't want to be told year in, year out they haven't got the money. I want to deal with, just briefly, the areas that haven't actually been covered, which are forgotten. Now, Vera will know, as well as I do, in appeal work, I just want to deal with miscarriages of justice just for a moment. Because obviously I have great experience of those cases which have led to reversals in the Court of Appeal. But how do they begin? You'd be interested to know they certainly don't begin with legal aid. Because in the first place, if you're locked up and you've been there for 16 years, as some of these people had, fortunately they're out, it starts in the prison cell with the individual saying, hey, I've got a point. Nobody wants to know. Nobody does anything. Lawyers actually find it difficult to get engaged. Then along comes, as in the old days, a television program that actually highlights the predicament and maybe spends some money on a bit of scientific research that no one else is prepared to spend the money on. And maybe they dig up a forensic test that shows that the original tests were wrong. And that's how you get into the Birmingham 6. It took a lot of pro bono work. And it still does, even though you've got the Criminal Cases Review Commission in Birmingham. To get a case considered by the Commission, you as an individual sitting in a prison cell have got to persuade a lawyer to present your case to the Commission so they understand what it's about. How many lawyers are prepared, virtually, and this is where solicitors come in, as well as barristers obviously, prepared to spend the time of going to the prison, working out, getting all the case papers, there's been a trial, maybe 2 trials, maybe a previous appeal that's been turned down, go through it all, take the time to relate to that individual, work out whether it's a worthwhile appeal. Very few want to do it. I could name the numbers of prepared to do that kind of work. There's about 6 in the whole country. One of the reasons is not just the amount of work, is that basically it's just not covered. It's certainly not covered adequately, and these cases go by the board on the whole. Now, of course, some of them don't have merit, but how do you discover whether they do or they don't? Someone's got to do the groundwork. Secondly, another area where it's just not covered, inquests. I've always thought, actually, it's one of the most important things for somebody, the need to know how somebody you loved died. Couldn't be more basic than that. You know what the original objection was to providing legal aid for inquests for ordinary families so they could get a decent hearing, representation? The original objection, which came, I don't know whether it was for the first time, but Lord Denning, when he was alive, said, but they're dead. Why would they want representation? It was as basic as that. Well, we've moved on, of course. We now have the Legal Services Commission. Article 2 is engaged. You'll probably get, if you're lucky, you'll probably get some funding for some of these cases, but not all of them, plainly. And there are large numbers of people, whether it's, it might be a death in custody, it might be where Article 2 is probably engaged, but there'll be lots of other occasions where families are just not getting representation at the very moment they need it most. And there still isn't, even in the Coroner's Bill, and Inquest, the organisation.
Mr. Mansfield,
yes.
can I remind you of the time?
Yes. And so, all right, I'll bring, there's one other gap. I won't elaborate on it, but since 2004, asylum seekers here in this country have also had a really rough time. Never mind the tabloids, and everyone's regarded as bogus, but also it's extremely difficult for lawyers working in that area now. There are many cases where there are rejections of applications even without a proper hearing. So I think, never mind restrictions on legal aid and conglomerates and all the rest of it, legal aid should be, and that's probably Tony Blair giving us a last minute message.